Hello, and welcome to the Veteran's Voice. My name is Joe Armstrong, and I will be your host for today's show. Today, I would like to speak to you about what PTSD is and how to go about filing a claim for PTSD, and also the 5 common misconceptions. What is PTSD? PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a psychiatric disorder that can occur following the experience or witnessing of a life-threatening event such as military combat, natural disasters, terrorist incidents, serious accidents, or physical or sexual assault in adult or childhood. People with PTSD experience 3 different kinds of symptoms. The first set of symptoms involves reliving the trauma in some way, such as becoming upset when confronted with the traumatic reminder, or thinking about the trauma when you are trying to do something else. The second set of symptoms involves either staying away from places or people that remind you of the trauma, isolating from other people, or feeling numb. The third set of symptoms includes things such as feeling on guard, irritable, or have a startling, easily reflex. Let me start by first talking about the 5 misconceptions of PTSD. A common misconception about post-traumatic stress disorder is that it only occurs in service members or veterans that have experienced the horrors of war. According to the National Center for PTSD, that simply is not true. 7 to 8% of the general American population will experience PTSD at some point in their lives. That means that in the United States, there are approximately 5.2 million adults with PTSD at any given time. But the sad truth is that PTSD is quite common in military veterans. If you live and work in a constant state of stress, such as combat, you're never giving your body or your mind the ample time it needs to digest and process what you're experiencing. It's this weakening of the senses that allows you to become overwhelmed when you're subjected to an intense, immediate event. It's like sweltering through a 110-degree summer and then deciding to jump headfirst into an ice bath. When you served in a combat zone, the emotional changes that occur can be substantial. Roughly 30% of veterans from the Vietnam era require treatment for PTSD or depression symptoms. Even by today's standards, 1 in 5 service members returning from the service in Iraq and Afghanistan suffer the same mal effects. Remember that just because you have the feelings of sadness, anger, exuberance, or even the occasional desire to be alone, you don't necessarily have PTSD. These are normal emotional responses to mental trauma and are experienced by people who have mental illnesses as well as those who don't. With that said, here are the 5 common misconceptions regarding PTSD. Number 1, PTSD only happens to those who can't handle tough situations. People often think that having post-traumatic stress disorder is a sign of mental weakness. In reality, even the mentally toughest human can emotionally be affected by something if they're mentally unprepared for the event, especially when it comes to combat. Psychological trauma is a product of the complex relationship between biological and physiological, historical, and social factors. Thus, it varies greatly from person to person. Number 2, all service members and veterans have PTSD. While people who are exposed to traumatic events are inherently more susceptible to psychological trauma, not every military member develops PTSD. Just like in all things human, people are different and react differently to these stresses. Some service members are more adept at managing stress, while many others have never even been exposed to these situations. Each service member or veteran is very unique in their experiences and should be treated as such. Number 3, PTSD isn't something you can overcome. PTSD should never be taken lightly, but it also doesn't mean that you can't learn to overcome these issues. PTSD is a trauma that can be treated and managed with proper mental health care. Never just accept the problem, just like the military teaches you. Tackle the issue head on and get the care you need. And remember, what works for one person may not work for another. Find out what works for you and stick with it. Number 4, PTSD occurs instantly after the traumatic event. Oftentimes, it can take more than a month for symptoms to emerge. In many cases, new stresses or old memories can bring prior trauma to the forefront. This causes the mental anguish the person suffered previously to emerge and take root in a variety of ways. The most common symptoms can be seen as avoidance or hyperarousal. Don't be surprised if things that didn't affect you then affect you now. Just be prepared to handle these issues right away and don't let yourself become overwhelmed. Number 5, PTSD makes you unstable and violent. While PTSD symptoms can widely vary, angry, outbursts, and violence don't always occur, even if the illness was brought on by a violent event. Moreover, how a person reacts to a traumatic event is wholly dependent on their individual qualities and feelings. The presence of PTSD or psychological conditions does not make someone more prone to violence. Therefore, someone with PTSD should not be viewed as a threat in the workplace. Okay, so you want to file a claim for PTSD. What do? There are 2 basic steps to receive a disability from the Veterans Administration for PTSD. The first step is filing a claim with the VA for PTSD. The second and most important is submitting a stressor letter, which we will talk about shortly. Most combat veterans do not trust the government or the VA. This is understandable considering the treatment most veterans received during and after the Vietnam War. But the VA has improved in most places, and the benefits are there for the combat veterans. The VA does not go looking for the combat veteran with PTSD. You must push aside any bad feelings and make the effort to receive the earned benefits. Filing a claim. As ridiculous as this may seem, all combat veterans must not only prove that they were in combat, they must also prove that they were in the military. This process screens out the phony combat wannabes. It's surprising how many combat veterans have surfaced who are on top secret missions, and of course, there's no record of their ever being in the military because their missions were so secret. I do not recommend that you file a claim on your own. There are several veterans organizations who will represent you on a disability claim, such as the VFW, the American Legion, the DAV, the AMVETS, and Vietnam Veterans of America. If you do not have a veterans organization in your area where you can meet with a service officer, you can go online and find the nearest one to you. Tell them that you want to file a claim for disability. The veteran service officer will send you a power of attorney form. You sign this paper and send it back through the mail. This gives the veteran service officer your permission to represent you in your claim. The veteran service officer, after filling out the necessary forms, opens your claim and forwards it to the VA regional office in your area. Opening the claim is actually a simple process. Now let's discuss the stressor letter. This is the single most important factor in obtaining disability for the combat veteran. After your claim has been filed, usually within 30 to 60 days, you will receive a letter from the VA stating that they have received your claim for PTSD. Then you will be asked to submit a stressor letter. This is a written record of combat experiences which you felt were life-threatening or have caused you to display symptoms of PTSD. They will also note that they understand how difficult this can be for some veterans, thinking about war experiences and writing them down. And for many, this is difficult. Some can't write well. Some are too terrified to think in detail about their war experience. Chances are the average veteran cannot write a stressor letter that will pass the rating board. Once a stressor letter has been rejected by the rating board, the process to receive disability can be long and discouraging. Many veterans give up and never receive the disability they deserve. The VA will tell you how to write the letter or what details to include. If the letter is rejected, many combat veterans will give up before appealing to the rating board decision. So a veteran must submit a solid stressor letter and pass the rating board. What to include in a stressor letter? The following is a list of 10 items that you should include in your stressor letter. Number 1, name, rank, service number, dates and times you were in the war zone. Make sure your current address and claim number are at the top of your stressor letter. Begin by restating your name, rank, and service number. Then begin with your war service. Do not mention the time in the United States. Many veterans ramble on about stateside service, and this has nothing to do with combat stress. If your MOS or specialty was something other than combat related, supply, mortar transport, etc., but you did not serve in your MOS or specialty, mention it here because the VA will turn you down unless you can prove that you're in combat. If you're in the Special Forces or recon, etc., don't go into details about stateside training. Number 2, were you wounded? If you were wounded, include the dates if possible and the number of times you were wounded. This refers only to wounds which were treated by medics, corpsmen, or doctors for which you received a Purple Heart or are a matter of record. If you had malaria or any type malaria fever and were treated for it, mention it also. If you believe it may be in your records. Number 3, if you killed the enemy. This is tough but very necessary information. Include the times you actually saw the enemy and killed them. Be specific as possible. Don't say something like, my outfit killed 53 NVA in a firefight. This is too general. State what you were doing when the enemy was killed and how it affected you. I kept firing and could not see them falling as they ran toward me. Number 4, if you saw Americans die. Most combat veterans lost close friends in combat. For some veterans, remembering names is difficult, but this will definitely help your claim if you can remember the approximate date and names of the men in your outfit killed while you were there. If someone killed was your best friend, mention it and how it affected you. The names will be checked from the VA against the KIA list. If friends were wounded bad enough to be shipped home, you may mention this and include their names if possible. This is all verification that you were in combat. Try to use the real names instead of nicknames at all times. Number 5, if you saw a civilian dead in villages, the jungle, or other places. This was traumatic to many combat troops, especially if they had to handle the bodies. Seeing dead children often has long-range effects on combat vets, particularly if the children or civilians were killed during firefights or mistaken for the enemy. Number 6, if you're on a body detail, or if you otherwise handled the bodies of dead Americans, either in the field or in the rear, where the bodies were stripped for shipment home, this often causes extreme trauma to those who handled the bodies. Number 7, times you did not think you would survive. Incidents when you thought you would not be alive the next day help with PTS claims. When you had given up hope and thought for sure you would be killed with no chance of survival, describe in detail. Number 8, all incidents of combat, small arms fire, firefights, mortar, rocket attacks, booby traps, mines, artillery, etc. Each time you were in a life-threatening situation, were you able to return fire or not, walking through minefields, walking point, etc. Number 9, names of operations or search and destroy. Remembering names of specific field operations and sweeps can often be helpful because the military often left much information out of the service records. Some combat troops have very complete service records. Others have had the records lost or destroyed, or information was never entered. Any information you can remember about field operations is verification of combat role. Number 10, how your life has changed because of the war. State your problems today because of your war experience: divorce, substance abuse, nightmares, paranoia, trouble holding jobs, lack of feelings, etc. If you have been in therapy or other treatment, mention this in your stress letter. Stress the negative side of your life. Mention nothing good that has happened to you. Don't say you get along great with people and you are happy most of the time. Stress that life is a constant struggle due to your combat experience. You used to love fireworks, but now you hear them and you hit the ground. You used to love to go to sporting events, but now you can't cope with being in crowds, etc. Note, these 10 points will help you write a stressor letter, which will have a good chance of passing the VA rating board. When writing about combat, write how it affected you personally. Don't write stuff like, we sat around ate dinner, and the sergeant told us about his wife, and then Joe tried to steal my bean and wieners. Too many vets go into detail which is not important. Begin each segment of combat with the combat and how it affected you. You were scared, you thought you were going to die, etc. Many veterans are afraid to mention certain situations when they killed people for fear of charges being brought against them. This will not happen. Killings during combat or for survival, the government would have to prove you killed on purpose without just cause. And in cases of enemy troops and civilians, this is not possible. Many of these 10 points overlap each other. You must try to put them in some kind of order. Think about what you want to say for a few weeks before writing it down. Then try to arrange your thoughts in some kind of order. The best solution is to be brief and to the point. This is difficult for many veterans, which is why so many veterans with PTSD never follow through with a claim. The best average length for a stressor letter is not more than 4 pages single-spaced. What comes next? The compensation exam. At some point after you file for disability, either before or after you submitted your stressor letter, you receive a letter asking you to come to the nearest VA hospital in your area for a compensation examination. This just means that you're going to speak to a VA psychiatrist. The psychiatrist will or should ask you many questions about your background, including childhood and current social life, and your war service. The meeting with the doctor probably will last anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes. The VA will also reimburse you with a small travel allowance for coming. You must show up for this compensation exam. If for some reason you can't make it, then call the VA and they will reschedule you again. Most of all, relax. This psychiatrist is not the enemy, and it is his or her job to send a report to the VA regional office as to whether you show symptoms of PTSD. The psychiatrist is impartial. If you show symptoms of PTSD, it will be reported without any favor towards the VA. So relax and answer the questions to the best of your knowledge. Always stress the negative side of your life. Never be positive. Just like at the close of the stressor letter, you can do this and still tell the truth just by avoiding the positive. Here are some things not to say at a comp exam. Number 1, my life's okay. It's not or you wouldn't be there. Number 2, I sometimes hear voices. Hearing voices can lead to a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and your PTSD claim may be rejected. 3, I am happily married. It has often been decided that having PTSD automatically means an unhappy marriage. It can, but not always. Number 4, I love my job. I've been there 20 years. If you have managed to keep a job, it may be determined that that you interact normally and do not have PTSD. You can have one job and still be miserable. It's a matter of survival. Number 5, I have lots of friends. Never admit you have lots of friends. Chances are you don't anyways. At least not like the friends you made in combat situations where you can trust with your life. Number 6, don't threaten the doctor. I cannot overemphasize this. Some veterans scream, yell, and threaten to kill the doctor in an attempt to show symptoms of PTSD. 99% of the time, this is an act and won't help your claim. The main thing is to stress the negative side of your life, just as in the end of the stressor letter. If you had a substance abuse problem since before your war service, it should be best not to mention it. Stress the fact that you are depressed and have nightmares, and feel that the war has altered your life. Just remember to stress the negative instead of anything positive in your life. Okay, now you're ready to write that stressor letter. Are you ready to file the PTS exam? Now that we have talked about stressors and finding a service officer, let's think about one other area you need to be prepared for. Your chances of getting a higher rating are diminished greatly if you have not been under the care of a psychiatrist, have not had meds given to you for PTSD symptoms, and also if you have not been going to either the psychiatrist, social worker, or a PTS group, or all of these for at least 6 months on a regular basis. You must show that you have tried to have your illness treated. This carries a lot of weight with your claim. You need to do the following to strengthen your claim. First, get a complete copy of your VA records. You'll have to sign for them and usually wait a few weeks. Once you have these copies, carry them with you, always whenever you go to the VA, especially your records concerning your PTSD claim. Remember, the VA has the bad habit of losing your records. Have them updated at least quarterly. Go to your psychiatrist, the doctor that ordered your meds, any group leader you have had for PTS group, any social worker, or any civilian doctor you have worked with, and ask them all to write you a personal letter, rating you with the severity of your PTSD. They will not offer these letters, and don't ask the letter in front of others. Do it privately. You should never be refused. The letter may not say what you want, but the chances of getting a solid letter from them is highly likely. Once you have these letters, have them included in your record by your service officer. Do not trust the VA to include them. Always have them with you at all times. I would recommend that when possible, that you do not subject yourself to an extended lockdown for PTSD. Try using a group or one of the counselors in lieu of this PTSD group. Remember, if you don't show emotion and tears in your interview or groups, that you're probably going nowhere with your claim. I know it's hard, and you have in many cases had your feelings hidden for many years now, but you have to release them. This is not the time for you to be sucking it up as you have been doing for the years. Don't try and be a hard ass, and don't ever cause or threaten your doctor or go there under the influence of any drugs or alcohol other than what has been prescribed for you by the VA. You will find that not only will this benefit your claim, but it will also benefit your personally well-being by helping you expunge many of the horrors you experienced in combat. When you go for your CMP, take your records and these letters with you and offer them before the CMP begins. Chances are they won't have this information. This same applies if you apply for Social Security. Remember, if you end up with a total disability rating of 70% or more for PTSD or a condition of service-connected disabilities, you are considered unemployable. That's assuming you're not working. And you can get 100% from the VA if you have worked enough quarters from Social Security as well. Don't forget, we did things by the numbers in the military. If you do them by the numbers, and your claim for chances of being turned down the first time have been greatly diminished. The least that will happen is that out of the gate, whatever rating you get will be higher than it would have been without the supportive information. You can always appeal a lower rating, which is a lot easier to appeal than a flat denial. I know it's a lot to digest right now, so if you'd like a printed copy of what we have discussed here today or on any of our shows, please email me at president@vva1044maine.org and include your mailing address and I will send you a copy. On our next show, we will have a special guest, Miss Lisa Phillips from the World War II Families for the Return of the Missing, WWRM, and we will discuss the POW MIA issues, so please tune in. Thank you for watching The Veteran's Voice. I'm Joe Armstrong. Until the next time, Don't give up the good fight.